Welcome back to Open Heart Conversations, where we come together as community to explore the world's enduring spiritual and religious traditions. I'm your host, Reverend Dr. José M. Román. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming back Bishop Heather Shea, the Chief Executive Officer and Spiritual Director of the United Palace of Spiritual Arts. Welcome back, Reverend Heather Shea.
Thank you, Jose. It's wonderful being here. And thank you to our very special guests today for joining us.
Absolutely. We have a very special program today. We will be exploring the shadow. And with us is one of our premier teachers, writers, and philosophers of our time, our very own chair of our board of directors of the United Palace of Spiritual Arts, Jean Houston. Welcome back, Jean.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here and with my old friend, Carolyn Myss, who is a piece of work as something else again. As we'll see.
Absolutely. It is so exciting to have one of, as I was about to say, and you're absolutely correct, and a remarkable work of spiritual art that we happen to have today. One of the great writers, medical intuitives, and teachers of our time, Carolyn Myss. Carolyn, welcome to Open Heart Conversations.
Thank you. Thank you. I would not miss an opportunity to be somewhere with Jean, believe me, ever. So it is my pleasure to be here, and thank you. It's nice to meet you both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Jean, I'm going to leave it up to you. How would you open a conversation with such a great teacher around the shadow?
I would open it with a story. It's all storied. And the story I'm going to tell is one that I don't think anybody here knows. It began with a great friend of mine who was a Jungian psychiatrist, Dr. Edmund Whitmont. And when he was a young man, and it already was very much immersed in Jungian philosophy, he was a psychiatrist, he went to visit Dr. Jung, and he went to Bollingen. And they said, well, he's not here, but go sit in the garden. He'll show up. So he sat in the garden, and he was stunned because in front of him was this vast hole, and all kinds of dirt was being, just thrown up from the hole. Just dirt, dirt, dirt. And after a while, this huge naked man crawled out of the hole, grunted at him, and went off into Bollingen. It was Carl Jung, who had been digging in the hole and was totally naked. And that was his introduction. And then about a half hour later, he came back again, beautifully coiffed, and they sat down and talked. That's my story. What would you make of it from the shadow's point of view?
I think that's delicious. I think Carl Jung would have wanted to put his hands into the shadow. Mm-hmm. He would have wanted, and that's what he did, to smell it, to put all his five senses into it, and to get rid of the earth. And for him, the shadow was where human beings dwelled. That was their, I would call it their power battery, that the unknown, we were marionettes, and it's the shadow that pulls the strings. Oh. And so for him, the shadow was the heart of the great mystery. And so for him, it could have just been an exercise in earth power, because he related to the elements intimately. Mm-hmm. So that's how I would say it. It's probably a good thing for someone to do, roll around in the earth.
Caroline, the person who first actually discussed the idea of the shadow was Carl Jung. With that in mind, can you tell us a little bit about who was Carl Jung and what is the importance of his work?
Jung is one of the people that we could say, one of those individuals that changes the course of human history. That and people like that don't come along very often, but when they do, they are cosmic power changers. He opened up the cosmos, and when you compare him to, like, Freud was cologne, but he was cosmic perfume, and he opened up access to the collective, and Freud couldn't have even dreamt to go that high. And Freud kind of started to unlock the pathway into our interior psyche and into the soul, and began to give us language through which we could articulate our interior fiber and bring the collective out, in and out. And so if you could, if I would say that he was the catalyst for the transformation that we have been going through ever since.
And may I ask a question? It's really for our listeners. We have a different variety of people who tune in or watch us, mm-hmm. and may have heard of this term shadow, or have some idea what shadow means. And could you sort of and maybe I'll ask this for Jean also. What is shadow, and what does it mean to us? Because I think that would be helpful for those who may not have been working in the field for a while.
Well, the shadow, would be described as the unknown part of yourself that has authority in you, great authority. And it is the part, if you ask someone, why'd you do this? And they say, I don't know. Well, you would say, you should say, I'll be right back. I'm going to consult my shadow. And it's the part that it takes you a great deal of time to become comfortable with. You're not born knowing yourself at all, which strikes people as being a very, unbelievable thought, but it's true. You don't know yourself at all. You're as unknown to yourself as you are to a stranger, and you have to get to know yourself. And so you don't know why you do the things you do, but you certainly don't know your archetypal patterns, and you don't know why you have the myths you do, and how powerful they are, how unbelievably powerful a myth is in your head, or a sacred myth, a myth of God. Just the idea that how many people believe that bad things should not happen to good people. That is traced to your relationship to God. And that's how you've structured your whole idea of how God operates. And all your superstitions, and it's in your spiritual DNA. And that is a psychic myth. That there's no truth to that at all. It goes into the law of karma. It goes into all kinds of things, but it's a myth.
Let us then just pick up with the myth, which I think of as something that never was, but is always happening. The kind of coded DNA of the human psyche, without which we just shrivel up and become ghosts of ourselves. I'm going to ask you about your own, well, I'll use the ancient Greek term, idos, Plato's word, the divine idea. Everything had an idos, an essence, a divinity that was part of itself. I'm going to ask you, dear friend, how does the idos, the essence, self, the mythic structure, the divine idea of Carolyn, what does that idos think of your work in exploring the shadow from the perspective of the divine idea? It's a mythic question.
Under normal circumstances, Jean, if you and I were just speaking in a room together as sisters, I would have to say to you, I need to pray on that, because you have not asked me a simple question. You've asked my soul a question.
That's right.
You haven't asked me a question. And I need to take that into prayer. So I don't have that privilege right now to do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to give you the best answer to that. And so it's an inadequate answer. And But I can only, off the top of my head, say to you that I live a very prayerful life, a very quiet, prayerful life. And I have learned through the years that I have been led into a deep rapport with the holy world, that for me it is I live within a bio-spiritual ecological
lovely, lovely.
And so in which all life breathes together. And so I have come to understand the divine in an organic way, but also an intimate way. So I breathe God. And if I am out of alignment, if I am falling out of alignment, then my whole bio-spiritual ecological system falls out of alignment, because it is one and the same. It's one and the same. It is an ecological bio-spiritual theology fiber system. And I'm alerted. And I have to respond immediately.
Yes.
I feel it in my tissue. I feel it in the walls of my soul. I feel it. I require a lot of silence, a lot of prayer. I never play music. I'm very monastic, not as a discipline, but as a response. I have to hear all the time. So.
But then, dear friend, how were you able to live in what others would call divided and distinguished worlds, being able to do such deep, deep work on the shadow while keeping your monastic essence?
Because I was born upside down. You know, I tell you the truth, Jean, but this interview shouldn't be about me and my private self, but I was born in the observational mode. I've been with a Jungian analyst, spiritual director, for 24 years now. 2 hours a week, 24 years. He's a theologian, a spirit, and a Jungian analyst out of Switzerland, a Catholic. So we're woven of the same substance. PhD in psychology, PhD from in theology, a good old Catholic from the south side of Chicago. And then he got studied 14 years in Switzerland. And I said to him, I have never been able to contact physical life in an ordinary way. And I am so comfortable observing it and hearing the other side and being in my and observing evil and observing good and watching the dynamics. But I've never been able to. When I was 7, I knew I would be a writer. When I was 9, I was told, Carolyn, you're not going to marry this lifetime. I said, okay. I was always given my orders and instructions. You had to go do this. Just like that. It was always this gentle guidance.
When I reflect on the question that Jean just asked you, it really hits me how now I understand why you both call each other sister, because mythically speaking, I view you both as kind of modern day Moses, in the sense that you are both leading us to the promised land, and the promised land is really intimate. It's spaces within our own spirit, soul, and consciousness that we human beings need to explore in order to evolve. And both of you have done that in your work. You lead us into the promised land of our own hearts. If that is indeed true, then if you were leading us into that space called the shadow, what is the shadow? How does it originate? Walk us into that promised land of our own inner being. What is the shadow, and how does it originate in us?
Let's start with this. Before we get to the shadow, before we get there, let's start with this. Power is the fundamental ingredient of the human experience. Power. Everything is power. Everything. Everything we do is a negotiation of power. What we wear, how we think, what we eat. Is this going to empower me? Will it disempower me? If I'm diabetic, this cookie will disempower me. Every single thing. And so we start out by a relationship with tactile power. Is this pen powerful? Is it expensive? What has power? Our senses relate to power. Eventually, we begin to understand how emotional power works, belief power, what people believe. We begin to observe what people believe, what words have power. If I say this word to you, I watch you get disempowered. And that activates. As soon as our appetites are activated, our shadow's activated. As soon as our appetites, as soon as our cravings, as soon as we start wanting things, as soon as we start craving things, we activate. As soon as we start losing control of ourselves, which happens around in early on in our life, and as soon as we lose touch with our conscience, when we really lose touch with that inner metronome that says, don't do this, don't do this, do this. And somewhere around age 7 or 8, we're tested, and we are tested as to whether or not we will stay in touch with that voice, because everybody's wired to hear that voice early on. And when we lose touch with that, if we decide the hell with that voice, that's when we associate telling the truth with fear. That's when we enter a relationship with the dark. That's when the dark becomes our ally and truth becomes our enemy. That's when we start developing a rapport with lying is power, truth is dangerous. And I give you the world we have today.
That was magnificent, and we can continue down that. I again, because of the audience, you've been using words like myth, and that's part of your question. For the folks watching, what is myth and what is archetype? And I feel that's a little more basic than the work that you're sharing right now, and it helps put that framework to going further into this conversation.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think people need to understand that archetype is a pattern of power, and we are designed to sense that pattern. We do it so fast, and we could call it labels. People sit around and label people this fast. That looks like a geek. That person looks like this. That person looks like a business person. That person looks like a con artist. We smell archetypes. We're so good at it. It's just that word seems to have edgy intellectualism to it. But we are designed, because we're designed to judge. And we pick out the archetypes because we're designed to survive. And our survival instinct sits there and senses. Are you friend or foe? And your second chakra kicks in, which senses, am I going to be attacked or do I attack? Safe or not? And all of these instincts take flight before you're even conscious, and they signal to you and they provide data, and you get that person's archetypal data this fast. That person looks like a con artist. I don't trust this person. All of that is an archetypal read, and you get it that fast. You don't tell yourself, oh, look, I'm psychic. I'm getting archetypal data. Isn't that fascinating? You don't do that because your wires aren't like that. You don't live in the hologram yet. But if you did, if you suddenly stopped yourself and said, my God, this is fascinating. This is all energetic data that my hologram is just taking in, and it's so incredible. I wonder what would happen if I look at that person. If you stopped for one bloody second and paid attention to how your hologram is just going and acquiring energetic data, you'd realize you were collecting archetypal data that fast. And if I stopped you and said, tell me how much you picked up in this room, you would have done 30 archetypal readings. You'd pick up on all their mythologies. I'd say, is that person a mother? Is that a mother myth? Good mother, nurturing, or abusive? What do you got there? Smothering mother, devouring mother? What do we have here? Is that person, what do we got there? Do we have someone there who's a judgmental person? Is that person a healer? Is this one a rescuer? What do we got here? Is that person a warrior? Do you feel like that you sense fight in that person? Is that person a coward? What do you pick up? Do you pick up a vampire in this one? You could pick up every one of those vibrations. And as soon as you do that, you pick up the mythologies and how they have organized themselves into behavioral traits. And as soon as you do that, you know exactly how their relationships go. And as soon as you do that, you just let it sink in, and you can go right into their cell tissue, and you see the map of their biology.
Is that what helped you, and I don't know if you still do it, in being able to read people's bodies, their illness,
well,
their healing?
I started out the other way, Jean. I started out in the 80s, just, I didn't even know what medical intuition was. I mean, and I had a skill I had no interest in. I have a genius for something I have no interest in, and a passion for something I have no talent for. But anyway,
Best way to go.
and so, God introduced me to Norm Shealy, to my dear forever friend. Norm
And he is
Shealy.
still alive, isn't he?
Yes, very much so.
100 years older. Mm-hmm.
Exactly 20 years older than me. So how old am I? I'm 68, he's 88, and we're born 2 days apart. So I'm December 2nd, he's December 4th. We are like this. Mm-hmm. And so, but we met when I was I think I was 31, he was 51. Mm-hmm. And so we've been together a long time. And so we met at a conference, and I was a publisher, I was an editor. But I could sense illness in people, and I thought, isn't that curious? But Pat Norris from the Menninger Clinic said, he's an interesting guy. He studies physician. He's for both of everyone listening. He's a doctor. He's a brain surgeon and a PhD, and he founded the American Holistic Medical Association. And he also is a mystic and just incredible. And he studied people who were what he called medical clairvoyants. And so I told him, I think I can do that. And he said, how good are you? I said, I don't know. And anyway, he called me with a patient in his office. And in the beginning, all I could do was sense that there was something wrong with someone and where it was and this kind of thing. And eventually I would get impressions of what was wrong in their life. Like, this person has a difficulty with marriage and is very frightened, or this or that. And so I started to find that fascinating. The more I found it fascinating, the more I took it seriously, the more I developed a desire to help people, the more my wires opened up. So it took years and decades. And then I began to wonder, how come I made the assumption that most people wanted to be healthy. And it was fascinating to me to realize most people don't. Not at all. Shadow. Most people don't. Most people find the idea of being whole and healthy terrifying. And that's when it got really fascinating to me. Because I thought, well, looky, what have we got here? And then I saw that most people find the street value of their wounds, of their weakness, to be too valuable to trade in for the empowerment of health.
Caroline, can you lead us into a conversation about what people refer to as the collective shadow? You've spoken a little bit about how the individual shadow arises. What is the collective shadow?
The collective, well, it is fascism. The collective shadow is like this. What's going on today is that in the collective, people sense that we've entered into a very different age of humanity. Everybody can sense that. And so, and that if there was one word that characterizes this age, it is the word holism. That's the template word. So it's downloaded into our bio-spiritual ecology, and we feel it's safe there. We go to the doctor and say, I want a holistic, because this is our little bitty earth and we can manage it, and so it's safe. But to take that micro into the macro, we don't want to do that. We don't want to do that. So, but it's going into the macro anyway. What is in one is in the whole. These are the laws of God is law. God is law. And this is the law, and these are our orders. So the dictate is to become whole. And in becoming whole, it is the energetic hologram. So our inner senses and our energetic senses are awakening, and our intuitive senses are opening up, which requires a very different relationship with how we understand the nature of God. It is the end of the Abrahamic religions and the idea that there is an off-planet male God. So it is the end of the Abrahamic religions. There is no off-planet male God. And so those mythologies are crumbling. And even though there's no global announcement of it, the tension that we feel in the air is manifested in watching movies in which people are saying, let's escape from this planet. Let's get out of here. This planet's not going to survive. And what we did in entering the nuclear age, we did something, I think, that was an incredible, heaven doesn't often intervene. But I think what we did in entering the nuclear age is that we were like Prometheus who stole the fire again. Mm-hmm. We stole the fire again with the intention of destroying life. And the two fundamental currents in human beings in our design have always been the capacity to survive and the capacity to create. And these two are like our little wheels. You know, we create fire, create this, create the printing press, create this, and it's always moved us forward in terms of civilization. But when we created nuclear weapons to destroy our own, we fell off the rails, and we cannot create anything to outdo what we've destroyed. And that has tampered with our deep instinct. We know it. We know it. We have our survival instinct has gone awry. And so I think heaven put us on a fast forward track to evolve, because our only way out of the hellhole we've painted ourselves into is that we evolve to a place where we are incapable of using the weaponry that we have created, that we become conscious enough to realize we don't have problems, we have predicaments. We can't go up to a glacier and say, now you stop melting. We have got to evolve into a more benevolent species that gets that we're entering a galactic era. We are so narcissistic and so this is the shadow, where, in fact, I'm so tired of talking about love, because what love is, we have to talk about the basics, which is power, and the fact that we're terrified to empower other human beings. Long before love comes the realization that we are so afraid to empower other human beings, to give them a compliment, to raise them from the dirt and say, this is your chance to be an equal, to be this, love is what I believe. We have to move from the love of power to the power of love. And that is the great challenge.
And in saying that, the power of love, and again, for what people are going through right now, where there is this power and confusion, and I will use the word trauma, or there's a lot of people right now who are very confused. There's a lot of traumas becoming important as people are in this society and wondering what to do or how to break through. If it's an individual, if it's a community, what can you offer people? And I know, June, you do this too, to help individuals and community not get stuck in their story or their shadow of saying, of non-health, non-mental health, non-emotional health, non-physical health, where you're mentioning people kind of get stuck or like being there, like being there, but are swirling around with that. How do you move people out of that?
Well, I think we have to move past the language we've been using and get to elephants in the room. And instead of just talking about moving people past, we've got to move you past. I'm going to talk to you about why you don't want to move past. I'm sick and tired of talking to you about moving past. I want to know why you're sabotaging your own journey. Tell me. So now I get out of you why you're vengeful, what you think you have coming to you, what comeuppance you think you're owed. So let's get all that on the table, or we're going nowhere.
And that's shadow work, isn't it?
Yes, but that's tough shadow work. And you better get down to the tough shadow work, because it's like when I got to forgiveness is a cakewalk. When you finally say to somebody, don't you dare tell me you're trying to forgive, because the word try goes, blah, blah, blah. What you're saying is, I'm still vengeful. I want to make them suffer. They humiliated me. So you have no interest in forgiveness. And you still think that because you're in pain, you're owed something. And that's the story they're telling themselves. And so until people get over the idea that they think they have some reward coming to them, how do they get over that? Where did that come from? Oh, I know, Christianity. The great curse of Jesus. The idea that you're getting a reward. Here, so you suffer because you'll be rewarded. Well, the hell with heaven. I want it now. And this is how that happened. I get rewarded for my suffering. What do you mean you get rewarded? And this is woundology. My wounds have street value. And that's how we became a litigious society. You wounded me, I get to sue you. So how do you get over the idea that you're entitled? That's the problem, is entitlement and woundology. You've got to name it properly before you can move through it.
And that sounds like that's true for individuals and for the society in general.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, you have to tell people what's true. You're not special. Humble up. Why don't you plan your own funeral? This is what I tell some of my students. Plan your funeral and see how many people are still crushed the day after you're buried. Because that will tell you how important you are. Get over yourself. Get over yourself. You are not owed anything by anybody. Get over yourself.
I would like to
Thank you.
I would like to offer you a poem, and I would love to hear, see, feel your response to it. It's from Christopher Fry's The Sleep of Prisoners.
Oh, I have that book.
Okay, and it goes, the human heart can go to the lengths of God. Dark and cold we may be, but this is no winter now. The frozen misery of centuries cracks, breaks, begins to move. The thunder is the thunder of the flood, the flow, the upstart spring. Thank God our time is now, when wrong comes up to meet us everywhere, never to leave us till we take the longest stride of soul folk ever took. Affairs are now soul size. The enterprise is exploration into God. What are you making for? It takes so many thousand years to wake, but will you wake for pity's sake?
One of my favorite poems of all time. You could not have picked a better jewel. I have it memorized. Oh, will you wake for pity's sake?
And I would love to hear your answer, your awakening answer.
Oh,
Where you are now to where you were 2 minutes ago, when you were speaking, when you were caught in the hologram of wickedness.
when I was caught in the hologram of wickedness?
No, the way you presented it, it blasted through us. And there's also that it's not done a dialectic, it's a natural, resonant, Renaissance-like response to the pandemic of our time.
Mm-hmm.
Pandemic of heart, of soul, and not just of body.
I think that what we are, I think even the pandemic, Jean, is the answer to is divine intervention. Because the great change agent historically has always been wars. And we must move toward holism. And look what's happened. We are, these past generations, we're the only people since World War II, the nuclear generations, that have taken down the fundamental pillars of society, that have held together societies forever. We've taken down the church. We've taken down family traditions. We've taken down the stabilities that have lasted through wars, World War I, World War II, Civil War, Russian War, revolutions. It didn't matter. Certain things held intact, and we took them all down. And then we took down the structure of what was real. Well, what's real? I mean, what's real? And we then, there's an epidemic of people questioning whether there's anything guiding this world. So we have this amorphous psychic zone where people feel like they could say, there is no God, there's no God, there's no God, which gives them permission to do whatever they want. And what if I may speak like a mystic theologian, that makes someone ripe for the kind of temptation that allows someone to negotiate, to negotiate their conscience. And so we don't talk about conscience anymore. We talk about consciousness, which is a completely useless word. It has absolutely no connection to the sacred. Nothing whatsoever. It has no connection whatsoever to the sacred. What does that word mean? It means, well, for some means they recycle. For other people, it means they're vegetarians. The word conscience means accountability. It means reflection. It suggests an inherent moral code. It suggests ethics. And it suggests that there's a force guiding. There's something in the system to which we are accountable. Well, we turned off the conscience bit. And as a result, people free float in, I can do what I want. It's created this hybrid ego called the inner self. That's neither the ordinary ego, nor is it a higher self, but it's an inner self that is like this little insular thing that is an alternate self that knows the truth, so that someone will say, I got it on the inner. And if they get it on the inner, they want to suggest that it's direct guidance, but not quite, but it's more truth than what they're normally telling you. So if they say, really, I got it on the inner, they get to now speak truth to you that they wouldn't, what their ordinary ego would never allow them to say. So this inner thing is this thing we've created so that our outer self can live a deception. And when we want to speak the truth, we haul out our inner self. So no wonder we're schizophrenic. No wonder. And we've taken away the necessary sacraments like confession to rid ourselves of conscious acts of betrayal. Which in fact, a sin is when you know you've made a choice in which other people will pay a price. This is the activity of the shadow.
Now, are we schizophrenic or are we polyphrenic, that we are exposed to so many different varieties of selfhood, selfhood yearnings and gobblings, that we have even lost the schizophrenic self, that we are in a muchness that is filled with the pre-medieval soup of the mind, so that we have lost the real imaginative and have become margins of ourselves.
Jean, the whole spiritual journey, the whole deep, rich journey, where you don't enter the soul unescorted, you have a spiritual director, a mentor, who goes with you week after week, prayer after prayer, year after year after year, because this deep journey opens you to other dimensions. Now, what you just said, and I hope I can say this, what this time is about, Jung's prelude of the veil's going to become thin, the archetypal world is going to begin to present itself. You're going to start speaking archetypes and you don't even realize it. You're going to start identifying archetypes, creating the world with archetypal patterns. We are consciously, unconsciously weaving ourselves together in an internet. Okay? And in that internet, we are The pandemic is a sickness from the internet, okay, from the collective. All right, which is why we're going to have at least 3 more evolution.
Pandemics.
Yes.
Pandemics in the past have often preceded renaissances. One needed almost the catharsis of the awful, and the unseen that then resulted in various other cultures in Renaissance, renascitas, rebirths, regenerative form. Where are these coming from? Did they require the pandemic in order to have the Renaissance and the genius self arise?
I don't know if I can say this so it makes sense. Look, one of the shifts that changes in mysticism, like it did with Jesus, like with Buddha, what were they? They were beings of present time, vertical consciousness. What is happening as we enter the energy age is we're going from horizontal chronos beings to kairos beings. Okay,
the loaded time, the time depth.
As we're shifting to kairos consciousness, nobody's announced that, but as we shift to kairos through our technology, through our weaving together, through our speed of consciousness, through all of we're also accessing multiple self patterns, which look like madness to the ordinary mind. So there's an increase in schizophrenia. There's an increase in bipolar. Autism is the kairos wiring in a chronos brain.
Yes, very much so.
Okay. And it's not until all of this, as we evolve and begin to articulate and recognize this, will our neurology expand to accommodate our electroneurology, our mystical neurology.
Can you say more again with the time that we have? Because Jean just read you or recited a poem of which you connect with. And in our world, which we've labeled spiritual artistry or the arts, in terms of how because we are the largest theater on Broadway, we're also a spiritual center of of being conscious and morality, if you will, of teaching, and we use the arts. So I would be interested in, Jean, you may help me with the question, the role of arts in helping the awakening, or what can an arts organization do, or a spiritual center, in helping people during this process, especially having Jean as our chairman?
So kairos becomes kairotic. Eros and kairos really being brought together and creating a love fest of arts, of music, of literature, of theater.
Yeah.
Where people are lifted beyond the encapsulation of the little local ego into a feeling force of art and beauty and possibility, where they come alive again. That's what we're talking about.
It sounds marvelous. I think, the role is education and inspiration. And to me, a society without the arts becomes barbaric. It's the most important center of light. So if anything, increase what you're doing.
Carol, you seem to be saying that in order for us to move into a better world, that we need to basically undertake shadow work. And by shadow work, it means literally reviewing everything, exploring everything, having the courage to even question the very idea of victimization. If that is in fact true, if we take that as the truth, what is the place of spiritual and religious organizations? Spiritual and religious organizations are usually defined by light chasing, right? We go after the sacred, the holy, the beautiful. which seems to suggest that shadow work is almost antithetical to spiritual and religious organizations. So what is in fact our place, the place of spiritual and religious organizations in doing shadow work?
I think that churches and organizations, I obviously don't know everything you do, but when I think of like a lot of the work, for example, the Catholic charities do, they go after the homeless. They feed the homeless. In the church that I'm part of, Grace Episcopal, we do a lot for homeless people. And you could say that's the shadow work, but it is the shadow work of society. It's taking, and I think when you can work with, the people that need help, people need help, and you put yourself out there and you introduce the word sacrifice into your community and say, we have to sacrifice for these people. We have more, they have less, and that's all there's to it. And that's all there's to it.
Carol, you literally are telling us that walking into, if you will, the marginalized, the forgotten, the discarded, the overlooked, is itself a form of shadow work.
Yes.
Very
Yes,
good.
it is. And it's also, I think, very important to but always deal with how it's a very difficult thing to do. And also how your policies and how you decide to handle people that you work with. And like I have a no coddling policy. I don't tolerate that. And because I don't coddle myself. And I'm also that way with the girls, my kids, the ones I've raised. I love them abundantly, but my job is to make them very strong, functional, loving human beings, and not give them the myth that there's something about them that is special and that they were born for something special, so that they think everybody else in the world will think that. As I tell them, I think you are as special as anything, but no one else does. So get your head on straight. You'll always come in this house and find an abundance of love waiting for you. Don't think you're going to walk in any other door and get that. You pick up your clothes. Does your aunt look like a maid? So you never, how do I say this? You never take away a human being's survival skills. And all I've ever seen parents do is tamper with their kids' survival skills. And they're just, how many dysfunctional kids we have? There are kids who are young adults in their late 20s and 30s who still can't earn a living. They still require their mommies. The proud boys, they're boys, and they're in their 30s and 40s and they're living with their mommies because they're not even men, and they decide to take it out on society. And there are half of them unemployed. Now, who do you think? What kind of thinking do you think emasculated them? Because they thought they were born for something special. Oh, well, obviously the delivery truck missed them. You see, the whole idea of life is co-creation. And who taught them prayer? Who taught them to walk humbly on the earth? You don't teach anybody to expect to have entitlement, but to have humility and gratitude.
Not I, but the wind that blows through me. a fine wind is blowing a new direction of time. If only it bear me, if only it carry me, if only, most lovely of all, I am borne by the fine wind that blows through the chaos of the world. Give me the next lines from your heart.
Hover over me.
Hover over me. Yes.
So hover over me while I travel through chaos, while I travel through stillness, while I land safely in your arms. Lord, bless me.
Thank you. Thank you for your depth, your wisdom, your raw, unafraid, speaking to the world and to our hearts and to who we yet may be and will be by virtue of your grace and those like you. Thank you for being on the planet at the same time. That's weird.
Well, I want to leave it with a note of hope because I am very hopeful.
Good. Why?
Why?
Why are you?
Because I think that anytime heaven tries this hard to wake us up, some people are really gonna wake up.
Yes.
And I know heaven's come very close to the ground now. But I also know heaven will not do anything for us that we must do for ourselves. That's why we're built with arms and legs and eyes and ears. So prayer's power.
Thank you. And before we wrap up this program, what I'd love to ask you is, well, first of all, thank you so much. It's been extraordinary. And before we finish, though, we'll go back to Jose. I know you have some programs out there if people are interested more in shadow work. Certainly you have a number of books, but again, for our listeners and viewers that listen to this and it's so extraordinary and want to learn more,
they should come to my website. I have a lot of my workshops are available for free at myss.com. And I have a reflections series, which are my online classes, and a reflections parallel. And so tell them to come, take a look, because we have to teach online now. I'm trying to get Jean to come and teach a class.
Sure.
Because who would not want that master teacher? So there you go.
Great. Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Before you leave, there's one last question. What are you working on now? What are the stuff that's really got you excited?
I'm working on a book on organic divinity.
Oh. Can't wait to read that, actually. That'll be, Carolyn, thank you so very, very, very much. This has indeed been a phenomenal treat for all of us, for all our listeners.
It's been a pleasure.
And Jean, as always, having you is such a complete gift. Thank you so much for participating in this open heart conversation.
Thank you so much. And I love the idea brought back of eating the God. Once and future times, we continue the feast.
Oh, Jean, I love you, girl.
Love you, friend.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bishop Heather Shea, thank you so much. And to all our viewers and our listeners, thank you for participating in another episode of Open Heart Conversations.